Hello, and welcome to EDUC 650's presentation on textbooks and study strategies. A lot of the information presented here will correlate with what our text Subjects Matters has to say about the use of textbooks and study strategies. What we'll be exploring today will be the good and the bad about textbooks, along with how to help your students prepare for assessments. First off, textbooks. So, when we think about textbooks, think back to your first thoughts about using textbooks when you were in middle school or high school. You probably thought, ugh, my backpack is so heavy. These are boring. I don't enjoy reading this, or I don't want to have to read this thing, but I need to for the assignment. Ugh. These were probably some of the thoughts that went through your head back then. However, textbooks do have some things to offer us. There are some benefits despite the negative thinking that goes along with them. They can be useful as a reference tool, and that's what you need to keep in mind. They should be a reference tool. They shouldn't be the sole source of information for your students in the content areas. Textbooks can be very overwhelming for students because of the text complexity. It isn't very helpful for the different multiple intelligences, especially those who are kinesthetic learners or who learn in different ways. And they're really not very useful for differentiation either. They definitely do not meet the needs of all learners. Because what about those students who read at or below grade level? Many textbooks, their readability levels are beyond the grade level that they're being used for. Typically, when you're using textbooks, you want to use a variety of other supplemental materials in conjunction with it. This is what we are talking about when we talk about text sets. Finding other resources that are accessible, of interest, and provide a variety of reading for your learners. This helps you create a multi-source curriculum that doesn't follow one sole resource. Here you're adding other resources, things like the magazine articles, poetry, videos, trade books, etc. Things that are going to help your students better understand the topic or the content. You also need a purpose for your students. Letting your students know what it is they're going to be doing for the unit or the lesson. This is where you need to think about that backwards design, the universal design, the understanding by design, whatever you may call it, where you plan your unit by working backwards from the mastery, what you want the students to be able to know, do, and show, where they are going to master those essential questions or objectives that are going to be part of your summative assessment. Then work backwards onto figuring out what your different instructional activities and the different resources the students will need and participate in so that they acquire that knowledge, and then deciding upon the key vocabulary and background knowledge that students need in order to be successful during your unit. Lastly, when you're looking to buy textbooks, you need to criticize the vocabulary, format of the textbook, the clarity of information, the organization, the quality. Are these things that your students will be able to access if you're looking at whole new sets for your situation? When using textbooks, there are certain things you will need to explicitly teach your students. You'll need to teach them about the format of the textbook. How is it organized? Do the chapters have headings, or is each summarized? Do they notice those sidebars or the text boxes of extra information, those little extra pieces of info that are added but not in the paragraph body of the text? And those are great places for students to find information that is important to remember. As part of noticing the format, they should pay attention to those other organizational features, such as the table of contents, index, and is there a glossary or are there other appendices added to the textbook? Students should also explore the text features and visuals that are available in the text, the type of print that indicates that something is valuable or important about the topic. And this is typically indicated by words or phrases that are bold-faced, italicized, underlined, and possibly even highlighted. They should pay attention to the graphic aids like tables and graphs, where information is laid out and compared or contrasted in a more visual way. They should check out maps where they show locations about important information. Especially teach them to pay attention to the pictures and captions. Many times I notice that students ignore those visuals and pay attention only to the paragraph style body text. There are times where students have asked me about their science textbooks and they'll say things like, I can't find the answer to one of the questions, Mrs. Schultz. It's nowhere in here. I've reread this section and I just can't find it. And then I would take their textbook and I'd flip through things, trying to check it out, help them, show them the skimming and scanning the text, since that's one of the strategies that I teach them. And then lo and behold, I find the answer in the picture and caption. And many times they'll mention, oh, well, I just didn't look at that. I was just reading the paragraphs. But they need to be aware of how those other visuals really help enhance the information. And the question was asking students to check out the visuals. But most students hone in on just the paragraphs and not any of the other information on the page. They're missing out on some valuable information by not honing in on those text features. We need to explicitly teach the purpose and use of text features in identifying nonfiction format. Our Common Core state assessments say that by the end of elementary, students should understand these and be able to navigate a textbook. Students should have mastered the different text structures by the end of 4th grade, whether that text is written in the format of description, sequence, problem and solution, cause and effect, or compare and contrast. And unfortunately, in the intermediate grades, textbooks aren't heavily used, so these text structures are not then used and applied to the textbooks. And using and identifying those text structures happens more once students hit middle school, typically in 6th grade. And being a middle school teacher, I notice that students are coming to the middle school with limited knowledge of how to apply the text structures to their textbooks. Therefore, it is still important for middle school and high school teachers to continue that modeling and explicit explaining at the upper levels of how to use a textbook, about the different text features, and reminding them of those different text structures. These will ensure that your students will make full use of them. Students will know not to just skip those graphic aids. They will better understand how useful that information is when connecting it to the text info. When using textbooks, make sure to have students first skim and scan the text to get a gist of what it's all about, so that they know what they'll be encountering and learning about, and they can anticipate the subject matter. Challenges to overcome when using textbooks. Sometimes the organization of a textbook is not very easy to figure out. It could be the progression of ideas, that they skip around too much. It could be the navigation. Where do they read next? Do they look at the text features? What text features match up with the different bodies of text? The questions in textbooks can sometimes be difficult, so teaching students the question-answer relationship can help them in this area. And also identifying the text structure of the nonfiction information, where those reminders of the different structures can help them when reading the information, because you read different text structures differently. The writing and information load can be hard to read as well. Textbooks aren't always written at students' level. You need to help them to clearly find the ideas and sift through information that seems murky. The amount of information in textbooks can be overwhelming. You need to assist students in getting the gist of the information, and also teach them explicitly how to paraphrase the text. As a 6th grade teacher, students have a difficult time putting someone else's ideas down and synthesizing it into their own words. Taking notes is another aspect of using the text that is difficult. At the elementary, there's little to no note-taking going on. It is a continual skill that they build upon throughout the rest of their academic careers at the middle school and high school level. This is something that definitely needs to be modeled in the content areas, how to be an effective note-taker. Concepts and vocabulary. We've talked a lot about vocabulary and how important it is in the content areas with those specialized terms. We need to teach students the difference between the big ideas and the concepts within the text. We need to teach them how to use their context clues to figure out the meanings of unknown words. And that's a big one with textbooks. There may be a glossary in the back of the text, but many students don't want to have to flip through the book to find it and then find the word and then read the meaning. Therefore, we need to teach them to find the vocab meaning within the text itself. Many times the definition or meaning will be explained before or after the word. The clue could be in an example given about the word. It could be shown as a synonym or antonym, or possibly explained in more detail in the next paragraph. These are things we need to explicitly show our students how those are laid out. When working with these vocabulary words and concepts, we need to find ways to help students remember them, which you can do through the examples in Chapter 5 or those that are in your teacher's toolbox. Remind students to check out those visuals and analyze them. What is that graphic trying to show me? What is important about that graphic? How does it connect to the text, to the information from my paragraphs, the body of the text? Those visuals can be so helpful for students, and we need them to pay attention to them. Regardless of all the negative things we hear about textbooks, there are some good to them, but we need to remember to teach our students how to get at that information through modeling and practice. It sounds simplistic, but many times they don't have that practice until they come to the middle school and high school levels. Study strategies and text taking. This is another big thing that students encounter in the middle school and high school, is having to use study strategies and how to best take tests. They may talk about it at the elementary level and have some very simplistic type of tests. And we always have our standardized tests, but not on a basis that is more regular as we see in the middle and high school areas where they have to show their mastery of the content through a test. We have found that tests have kind of become their own genre. Teachers find that they're teaching how to take a test, which is important in some ways, but building strong readers is the best way to prepare our students for tests. We also want to help them and provide ways that they can best approach a test, but having that strong reading background and knowing how to break things apart and make meaning is always going to be our best ways to have students prepare for tests, is through their reading skills. But one of the most obvious ways to help students when they're test taking is to build confidence. Have them practice. If you think about the forward exam, which is one of our big standardized tests nowadays, they have them practicing the tools. But along with that, students are getting practice in looking at what the test is asking, and they're attempting the questions along with using those tools. You can help students have that can-do attitude. Help them realize that this isn't the end-all, be-all, and they just need to do their best and use all the strategies that they have, all the tips and tricks that have been given to them. Sometimes the best ways to build those test-taking strategies is to have students share with one another how they study. What do they do to prepare for a test? Not necessarily a standardized test, but just normal tests every day. This is something that I do in the beginning of the year in 6th grade, especially when we encounter our first word work test. And before, when I know that their first content test is coming up. What ways do they study for a test? What ways can they study for a test? And many times the answers I get are they create note cards. They study with a family member or a friend. They take a look at the review questions. They might rewrite their notes and the important information, which I tell them is always the way that I used to study before a test when I was a kid. This also builds that community idea where the learners are coming together to share what best works for them, that collaboration that is so appropriate for our adolescent learners. I ask them to share how they attack a test. Do they go for those easy questions first, or do they attempt the harder questions? Do they underline or star certain parts of a question or answer? The forward exam has all these options digitally, and I find it best to let students talk about the tools that they use and what worked the best. Was it the post-it notes? Was it the highlighter tool? Was it that cross-out tool? All those different options that they have. What worked best for them and why? You can have the students approach the test as a challenge and ask them to beat the test. When students transition to the middle school and high school, one big thing that they are encountered with is justifying their answers. Sometimes students just want to give an answer and boom, I'm done. But as they get older, they're going to need to explain what from the text or from their experiences proves that their answer is the right one. This is happening more at the elementary, which is great, and I see it especially in the new math series that are coming around. They no longer can just say, well, I knew it because I knew it. They need to explain how they came to that conclusion. And that is a very good skill for all students to have. Help students understand the test format. Teaching the QAR format will help them to understand whether they are going to find the answer in the text, right there in the text. Where in the text are they going to have to search in different places? Is the answer something that they need to form an opinion on and figure out on their own? You could always give them an answer sheet or a cheat sheet or review sheet, whatever you want to call it, so they know what's going to be on the test. With any test that I administer for my reading, I provide a bookmark with the main topics and ideas that are going to be on the test. You should also explain to your students their time frame. Do they have to finish within the class time? Is this test or this assessment going to cover the course of a few days? You should always explain the rules and expectations for your students and allow them time to practice the test and how to answer with those expectations in mind. You should share some sample questions or tests that are similar to what they're going to be encountering with the assessment that they're going to be taking. For the big assessments, the standardized tests, think about what the questions and directions ask and try to restate them in students' own words. We know that if they're able to do this, they will be more successful and have a deeper understanding. Have students read the titles. Have them skim and scan the information so they know what they're going to be encountering, and that way they can also access their background knowledge and bring to the forefront in their brain what it is they're going to be focusing on. Make sure that they're looking at the different features of the assessment. Have them identify the genre. Is that question going to be asking them about poetry, or is it a nonfiction article? Is it going to be an excerpt from a trade book? That will help them to get their brains ready. Have them read the questions first. Knowing what the questions are asking you is going to help them to better navigate the text and find the information that's going to help them answer that question. And if it's available, teach them how to highlight and underline key phrases as they read. And sometimes I even have students do that within the question. Our job is not to stump kids, so that means you should be getting rid of any of those pop quiz ideas, but help them learn and access information. How many times in the real world do you go into a testing situation without knowing what you're going to be tested on? Think about your driver's test. When you go in for your driver's test, you know what the expected outcomes are. You're going to have to go in, they're going to do a little quick visual test, you're going to have a quick written test, you're going to go on your road test, they're going to have your parallel park, they're going to have you possibly do a Y turn. All those different things that you learned about in driver's ed, you knew were going to be on that driver's ed test. Or think about when you go to the dentist office. You know that they're going to be checking on your flossing, on your brushing habits. They're going to look for potential cavities and find out what is your daily routine for cleaning your teeth. You know what you're getting into in those real life situations. So what can teachers do? We can provide students with ideas of what they're going to be assessed on and how they're going to be graded. And this can be done through the essential questions. And many times I've seen lately that student or teachers are posting these essential questions somewhere in their room, on their whiteboard, on their wall somewhere. Their learning objectives, what the students are going to be able to do and should be able to do. Provide them with rubrics so they can see all the different areas and what exemplary looks like and basic looks like and minimal looks like. And give them study bookmarks. I do that for every single unit that I teach. I have a bookmark that they get and it'll say part 1. And part 1 you're going to be asked to do this, 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 and this. And part 2 you're going to be asked these things. So then they know that those are the things they need to prepare for when it comes to the assessment. You can give them exemplary examples of essays, papers, projects, presentations that meet the expectations of the assessment, that are showing mastery. What can students do? Well, students do have a part in, they have a stake in these assessments. What you can tell them that they should do when there's an assessment that's coming up is they should ask about what's going to be on the test. If the teacher doesn't provide them with a bookmark or review sheet, they should be asking what's going to be on the test. What are going to be the expectations? Students can make up their own sample questions, and you might find that you're going to want to use some of those on your assessment. Students should look at the vocabulary terms and make sure that they understand them and they study them and they know them. They could look at past tests that are given from that same class if those are available. Many students find that doing the easy questions first frees up their brain to attack the more challenging questions that are on the test. Students should make sure that they read all parts of the question. And this frustrates me to no end because many times the questions on tests are there are multiple questions within just one question of the test, and the students need to make sure that they're answering all parts of the question and then go back and reread their answers to make sure that they have addressed every single part of that question. Students should eliminate wrong answers. That is something that I do all the time. Well, this can't be right and neither can that, so now I have to choose between these two choices, and which one of these two choices seems like it's the best option. And students should also look for the negative words like not and opposite, which typically are underlined or bold-faced or identified in some way, or the subjective words like best, worst, choice, those kinds of things, and be aware of what exactly the question is asking. So these are the essentials of what we need to remember and provide for our learners in the area of test taking and using the test book. This concludes our presentation. Have a great day.